Day, it'll be breezy, rather pleasant. A high today at 71. Tonight, partly cloudy, low 58. Clouds tomorrow, breezy. Can't rule out some showers and a thunderstorm. The high at 72. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560. The Answer.
56 degrees at O'Hare, 59 Lakefront. Next news, 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560. The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Tasty Catering. The best value for your company's holiday party is at tastycatering.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. All right, let's take a breath.
Oh, you want to take a big breath? All
Take
right.
a little time out from talking impeachment and removal from office and transcripts of phone conversations between heads of state, and let's bring it down local. Let's talk about local corruption. Well, local education is what I meant to say.
Dan.
K through 12 education, Chicago public school style. CTU, the Chicago Teachers Union, started voting to authorize a strike earlier this week. They could authorize it before the week is out. Now, you're a coach now. Are you a CTU employee? Could you be the deciding vote?
I could be, but I have to join the union.
Oh, well, you're not. Okay. Well,
but I am a Chicago public school employee.
Maybe
I have a badge, though, too, don't you know?
Congratulations.
And a key to a locker that contains 12 volleyballs. This is big stuff.
What about the executive bathroom? Did you get
Don't
that
have
key?
that. Don't have the key to the unisex bathroom either, in case I decide to feel like a man.
Well, maybe go over to the field office and see if you get some time with Jesse Sharkey, John Cusack, Bernie Sanders, somebody, and they could arrange that for you. So the possibility of a teacher strike, pulling Peyton and Eli out of school next week, and
Oh, no,
have
not
them,
that. I'm coaching 5 different Chicago public school teams, and that would throw everything into chaos.
Well,
But of course, I care about the education first.
Oh, of course.
Of course.
Speaking of chaos, Chicago public school finances.
Our tax dollars at work, folks.
The school system that customarily runs billion-dollar annual budget deficits, that's junk rated, whose pension fund is under 50% funded. I mean, it's not as bad as police and fire, but it's not good. Whose system features the highest paid teachers in the nation before this contract. Highest paid teachers in the nation adjusted for cost of living. Whose system features teachers who put about 40,000, if they max out their years of service and thus their pension, put about 40 grand into their pension, save about 40 grand, they contribute. And then
what do they get?
The Chicago public school system does essentially what turns out to be a 4-to-1 match because of the 16% that's set aside. The Chicago public school system, the taxpayers, the management side is picking up 12 percentage points. So 75% of it. And so 40 grand in and 2.1 million guaranteed out for the average Chicago public school teacher.
For one teacher.
They've rejected 15% over 4.
16%.
16% over 4. 15% over 4.
So if you made $72,000 now, then you'd make $98,000
by the end of the term.
Yeah.
Step
It's a nice
increases,
deal.
all that great stuff. Sure, and that doesn't include the benefits packages either. So that's been rejected, thus this organizing for a strike vote. Chicago Tribune editorial board opined a couple weeks ago that they should take the deal. Including separate races based on years of service, the package works out to about a 24% raise for the average teacher over the life of the contract. Over the last 5 years, by contrast, U.S. inflation has totaled 8%. Right. Yeah. So 3x inflation.
Take the deal. It's a great deal. But what I hear my teacher friends say, they want smaller size classrooms and they need social workers at schools that have 500 plus kids. A nurse is not enough, and a nurse really can't do the work of a social worker.
Got it. A system that runs annual billion-dollar budget deficits and is junk rated because of its effective bankruptcy and continues imposing ever more frequent property tax increases on Chicago residents, and it runs down to Springfield for bailouts every spring. They're suggesting that we add to the largest line item, which is employees. That's the solution for them. In addition, of course, to the generous pay increases, picking up most of their pension contributions, and providing gold-plated health care coverage. Okay. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Jonathan Butcher, Senior Policy Analyst, Center for Education Policy, I should say. Jonathan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
What should we do about giving the Chicago Teachers Union what they deserve?
Well, I think you included really some of the high points, right? I mean, we're talking about a deal that would put teachers somewhere around $100,000 a year, potentially. This is something that we have seen teachers around the country in recent years do, and it has, effectively put students out of school and put parents in a bind as they find what to do for their children, and then sort of held lawmakers hostage, forcing them to do what they would put taxpayers in very difficult positions trying to honor whatever agreement is made. I think it's going to be important to remember going forward that some families in Chicago will have options, especially those using charter schools or finding private school options. I think that policymakers need to recognize that those families will still be sending their children to the place where they want to be sending them, and every parent in Chicago should have an option like that, especially in a time like this when enrollment in Chicago has been going down, and now teachers are walking out and putting those 300,000+ children out of the classroom.
Yeah, but if I had to pull my two kids out of school right now, they would be more than upset because they've established friendships there and they're on teams and they like their teachers.
Well, absolutely. And I think that if moving a child from one school to another is always going to be difficult, except in the case when the parent is not satisfied with what's happening with the child. And I think if a parent is already frustrated that their child is not getting a quality experience, this teacher strike forcing the parent to make accommodations while they, are trying to work and provide for their family.
We'll get over it. We'll get over it.
Yeah,
what the teachers know, what people that I don't know that try to reason through these things don't. That the public is going to side with the teachers, the parents who are being fleeced and whose children are being maleducated, generally speaking, in Chicago public schools when they're not being molested. Oh, by the way. And they're going to side with the teachers. Then there'll be a bunch of pressure, a bunch of people in red T-shirts running around Daily Plaza, and then Lori Lightfoot will write a blank check, and then we'll just move on to the next catastrophe in Chicago. That's what the teachers have figured out, and it's not just in Chicago, as you were talking about across the nation. Teacher strikes, even in more conservative areas than Chicago, have almost always benefited the teachers, and so there's no disincentive to go through this drama because ultimately they get what they want, which is a bigger paycheck and better benefits.
Well, at some point, these numbers will come back to haunt taxpayers, and they will realize that lawmakers are not going to be able to return to that pot anymore to find money to fund these increases. I mean, the reality is that healthcare costs continue to increase, and that schools, particularly districts, are paying administrators significantly more than what teachers are making in most places. And in places like Chicago, issues of, you mentioned corruption earlier, but issues of fraud are serious and recurring.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that
is
an ongoing problem.
We don't care.
And needs to be remedied.
Yeah, but John, you have to understand. I mean, I'm sure you do understand this. You're just trying to be like a thoughtful policy guy, like here's what's judicious. We have no interest in that. we can't get people interested in 500 cases of abuse of children inside CPS in just the last decade, per this Chicago Tribune expose. Can't even get people animated about that.
Well, because it didn't happen at their school. If it happened at their school, it'd be different.
Well, it happened at some schools.
Right, I know, but not in their neighborhood. So they're like, oh,
who's there? It happened in some of their neighborhoods at their schools. What are you talking about? This happened. People aren't interested in protecting children from sexual predators. You think they're worried about dollars and cents? They just simply aren't. Here's my question after that statement. You can reject the premise if you want, but you'd be wrong to do so. The question is this. The message to parents, should it not be, listen, you want your child to be educated, you want your child to be safe, then and you want to bring some sort of reckoning and reason to the Chicago Teachers Union and, frankly, the management side of it as well, then you know what you do. You take your kid out of public school. You go get one of those tax credit scholarships that are now being offered in Illinois, thanks be to God, and that's the play. The play is forget trying to reform the Politburo from the inside. Get your kid out. He is not, or she is not, an apparatchik to serve the machine. The promise and the requirement is to provide the best environment for your child to develop intellectually and interpersonally. Get them the frack out of CPS and into a place that is actually concerned with doing that.
Oh, I think you're right. And the surveys that we find of private school choice programs like the one in Illinois around the country are that when parents do begin to participate in those programs, they do like them. The satisfaction level is very high, but they may not have known beforehand, right? And so I think your message is well said, right? That we need to let parents know that there are other options out there. And we have found that once parents discover the opportunities that their children can have somewhere else, they are very pleased with them. And so I think letting more parents know about what the potential is something that can help, I think, to move the needle. I would say one other thought that's important for parents to know is that, by and large, voters and taxpayers do not know how much we spend per child in schools. They dramatically underestimate that.
Yes.
Well, how much are we spending, and what's the literacy rates and graduation rates?
How much are we spending? You got two boys in CPS. What you're making his point for him. It's $20,000 a kid in CPS. It's. I mean, not to step on your toes here, Jonathan Butcher, but I've only been following this and screeching about it for 25 years. I mean, this is more per high school graduate than New Trier. And you remember, high school graduation is like part of the point. More, 30 to 60% more than most of the suburban school districts in leafy, well-to-do suburbs. I mean, CPS spends an ungodly amount of money, particularly when you connect it to the results, and that's your point. But you're right. You're absolutely right, Jonathan. People have no idea. Oh, CPS is so poor. They probably spend like $5,000 a kid. We need to give them more money. If they really knew what I just said, comparing it to New Trier, then maybe there'd be a different opinion. I don't know.
That's right. And nationally representative surveys back that up, right? On average, people underestimate what we spend per child by about $4,000, just across the country on average. And I'm sure that in areas where they spend significantly more, Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York City, et cetera, the gap is there as well. The same goes for teacher pay. By and large, people underestimate what the pay and benefits packages are for teachers today. And I think the surveys, and this is clever, some of these surveys also give people the factual numbers, the right numbers, and then ask the question whether or not they support spending increases, and the percent that support increases drops when people are given the right figure and they know. So look, it's true. Knowledge is power, right? Once people understand what the facts are, it does change their opinion, right? It does help to persuade people that there's a better way, that there's a more responsible way to handle tax money and quality learning options for students.
Can you think of a recent example where a teacher's strike has resulted in the teachers taking it on the chin and actually getting less than less than they rejected, leading to their strike in the first place?
Well, I think in Oklahoma there was some discontent among the union and at the top level and among the actual striking teachers about what exactly the final deal wound up being. I think there was some discontent there among the teachers that walked out. I think in West Virginia, and this is just kind of based on general sentiment coming from op-ed pages and people on the ground there, I think voters began to realize, they began to demonstrate frustration with what the teachers were doing, and they began to see, right, that the union is really driving this. It's not just the average teacher in the classroom. This is being led by a special interest group. It's clear to everyone, especially at the legislature in Arizona, that all of the strikes and the effort there were being led by a special interest group that was out for more money. That was clear, from the beginning. And in fact, the offer that was made by Governor Ducey out in Arizona is very similar to what the union wound up achieving there. So they didn't get any more than what was offered before. So, there are cases here, right, where the union makes it look like they've won more than they actually have.
He is John Butcher.